Now, before the season, we did some prediction videos, and I'm not going to lie, I had Lions winning 10 games this year, making the playoffs, the last spot in the NFC. It's not really looking that way, but I have to say on offense, not on defense, but on offense, they're literally looking like the most scrappiest team. They can put up points with the exception of the Patriots game, and things are really clicking for this team. But I want to do this video not to bash Detroit Lions or the fans, but to give you a glimmer of hope. Now, a lot of good things have happened. You're 2 first-round picks and 2 second-round picks. So I want to open up the floor to you gentlemen. What are your thoughts on the Detroit Lions going into the 2023 NFL season in this draft? Do they pick up Hendon Hooker? Do they pick up Bryce Young? There's so much they can do. This can literally be the year they build a championship winning team for the future, or a contending team at that. What are y'all thoughts?
Yeah, I think realistically they're going to have some decisions to make, because I don't think there's a lot separating some of this quarterback class. I think like 3 will go in the top 3, 4 potentially. Mm-hmm. And the only person, and this is something we got to think about, right? Like we just talked about how bad this isn't going to be my pick. This would be my pick potentially if they didn't need a quarterback. But I would think the Lions, with their defensive needs, would be looking very strongly at Will Anderson from Alabama.
Ooh, I like
he's
that.
He's an edge rusher. He's a problem. And no matter what problems you have on defense, your quarterback having less time always helps solve that. Does that make sense? So Will Anderson could help them a ton. But then the flip side is, do you want Jared Goff to be your quarterback another year? And I think the answer to that question is a resounding no. And I believe the Lions will end up picking up. I think it'll be C.J. Stroud, and I think the thing that will separate him a little bit from Bryce Young is the 3 inches taller. He's 6'3". Bryce Young's is 6 foot. He's about 215, 220. He's a little bit more sturdy, and I think that'll help them a little bit more. So that's, I mean, man, they're going to have a good pick of the draw, man. But C.J. Stroud to the Lions, and then they're going to have to find a tight end, because that T.J. Hockenson trade was stupid.
Yeah, it was the dumbest thing I ever saw in my life. I'm like, why Sway? Why? It made absolutely no sense at all. Soup, what you got, man? What are your thoughts on this draft for next year?
I mean, not even just the draft, man. I think Detroit as a whole has a lot to look at in terms of decisions to make. It's not just like what players are we going to be picking up. I think Brad Holmes, the results, right? The wins and losses aren't reflective of how good a job he's done as a GM there. I think you could argue their last 2 drafts have been very successful. He's finding talent at all rounds, and not just like names, right? He's hitting on some talent. Like I'm looking at their their 2022 draft class. Aiden Hutchinson is a name that sticks out, right? Jameson Williams, obviously with the injury, he's not seeing the field right now, but I expect him to go off next season. Josh Pascal really hasn't come on the way that we had hoped that he would kind of be that bookend, but he's still that's good rotational depth, right? I think Kirby Joseph could still make a splash in this league, but we talk about it all the time. If you guys listen to the podcast, we talk about DBs, particularly the corner position is one of the I think it's the hardest position to learn in the NFL, transitioning from the college game, but DBs in general, right? Corners, safeties, that's just a hard thing to transition into. And normally those guys don't pop until year 2 or 3. So they've had some players and that was what 2022 draft. And then 2021, who they go get? They went and got oh Lord, what's his Penei Sewell, right? They got Penei Sewell. They shored up that offensive line and stuff. So they're building in different pieces. I think you could argue they've got a good cornerback in Jeff Okudah, who's finally looked like he's snapping into it. DeAndre Swift, if he could ever get healthy, when he is healthy, he's good. But having Jamal Williams there, that's a good 1-2 punch for them. And then Amon-Ra St. Brown, right? I think anybody who's been playing fantasy, I think you've been until the injury bug has hit him, right? Amon-Ra St. Brown, I think we could argue he's been a very reliable go-to. Now, I'm not going to sit here and make the case that he's a number 1 receiver. I think he's the number 1 option on that team based off of roster construction at the moment, because Jameson Williams not on the field.
Because Jameson Williams is going to be a problem.
Oh, Jameson Williams is going to be number one. Let's be very clear about that. But just because of his build, I think Amon-Ra St. Brown is actually probably he's a 3 masquerading as a 2 right now, just because of his size. We talked about the TJ Hawkinson trade. Like, I think on its face, it's very confusing. And this isn't a knock on TJ Hawkinson, right? Like, TJ Hawkinson, I think he's definitely top end of the tight end spectrum in the NFL. Trading him to a division rival is kind of weird for me. That was the weird part. Not necessarily him leaving. I think him staying in division was the weirdest part of that move. But you got to understand, like, that's not this. He was not this current front office selection. And I think we've seen a lot of those people get purged, or they've been allowed to go elsewhere, right? And we saw that beginning with Matt Stafford, who the feeling was mutual. He kind of wanted to leave, and they said, all right, well, it's not my guy anyway. We'll do that. But kind of like what Mike talked about, they got some big decisions to make at that quarterback position this season, because you do have what a lot of people would argue 3 really great quarterbacks in this draft class. I don't think Caleb Williams comes out. I'm not talking about this draft class, but maybe Caleb Williams comes out in the 2024 draft. And so that's really the decision that you have to make, right? One, do you think that you're going to be in a position where you could get a Caleb Williams in 2024? Are you willing to gamble and risk that, right?
Yeah.
Or do you go ahead and you take your shots now, because Jared Goff's contract becomes movable this offseason. So they can part ways with him now in 2023, and they'll only incur a dead cap hit of $10 million. If they hold on, right? Let's say they hold on and they're not going to take a quarterback this year, which I think would be a mistake, but let's say they get into the Caleb Williams sweepstakes. If they let Jared Goff go at the end of 2024, it's a $5 million dead cap hit. So his contract is very, very movable. Jared Goff, for all of his warts and flaws, I think has shown that he can be a serviceable quarterback in this league. He will probably go on to have a very strong career as a bridge quarterback, backup QB. So somebody will pick him up for a reasonable amount of money because he can make plays. He's just not very consistent all the time. But my point is, Detroit has a lot of pieces already in place. If you look at their roster, like if you just looked at their roster on paper, you would not think that this team has the record that they have. And I think anybody who's really been watching these games outside of maybe 2 this season, very close games that are indicative of a young team that doesn't know how to win. Anybody that's ever played sports, you probably had a coach tell you that winning is a skill, and it 100% is. Learning how to close out a game is 100% a skill. It's not just luck. You can have the most talented people. You can have the most talented roster. But if you guys don't know how to turn it on, you know what to do, the situational awareness, right? You could just end up costing your team a game. And I think that's what we're seeing with Detroit. The bigger question is Dan Campbell going to be the head coach next season? And I like Dan Campbell, and I think most of the nation likes Dan Campbell, and we fell in love with him like from the moment that he did his introductory press conference. And I think the Hard Knocks
Motor City Dan,
I think he's the perfect personality for this season. I think he's the perfect personality for that team. But I think now the biggest thing with the head coach, right? Like, you have to be able to win, and you have to be able to get your team, your guys to win. I think those players are 100% bought into whatever Dan Campbell is selling. And I think that's half the battle. Now, what separates you from just being any old coach and being a good head coach is, can you elevate your men to the next level and get them to win? They're bought into the system. They believe in it. They're fighting. They're scrappy. That's great, because before this team was just a floundering mess. But now you've got these guys that are buying into a system, and they keep losing. How long can you hold the attention of these young players? How long can you convince them to continue to buy into your system when you continue to lose? So front office is going to have to make some decisions. And I think they don't. I think they know that. I don't think they want to part ways with Dan Campbell. And I think they're giving him they're allowing him time to save his job this season. But I think you can say that he's firmly on the hot seat, and we see that because they started purging certain members of his staff, right? Aubrey Pleasant got let go. Yeah. I think you're going to start to see that as the weeks pile on. Those coordinators and stuff, those other coaches, those assistants are going to start getting purged. And the only person that's going to be left to purge at the end of the season is Dan. So I would love for him to stay because, like I said, I love his personality. And I believe in what he's doing. I just think in a results-driven league, he's probably going to be asked out before he has a chance to really get a quarterback in there that would help him so much. But unfortunately, right, he's got Jared Goff as a quarterback that's already seen success, and he's seen success with another coach. And I think when you look at those two, people are arguing. They're saying, oh, you couldn't do it with Jared Goff. Well, McVay did it with Goff.
Yeah.
And you can argue the rosters are completely different and you would have a valid point, but most people just throw logic out the window and they just say, well, somebody else did it with him. Why can't you get at least a fraction of that? So we'll see. We'll see. I'm hopeful for Detroit, man. I'm sad for you fans because I think Detroit's got some fantastic fans. And I think this team, which doesn't make any sense, I think it's one of the highest scoring offenses in the league this year, but they can't like come home with the
man.
Oh man, the defense is just atrocious.
And let's talk their draft picks real quick. Like, man, looking at next year. All right, so they got 2 first-round picks. One is the Lions' own pick. The other one is the Rams' pick. Then they got 2 second-round picks, a 3rd-round pick, no 4th round. Then they have 1 5th and 2 6th-round picks, right? And in looking at that, I'm like, Lord, the O-line is pretty solid. I mean, look, you just get a quarterback in that 1st round, playing for the future, okay? And then your defense is losing you games, right? So if you go defense, you have the 1st round pick, defense again in the 2nd round, and then you could just kind of add depth to the rest of the area. Then you have free agency and stuff like that. I mean, it's like, man, a lot of beautiful things could really happen with that, right?
Well, they have the collateral, right? They have the collateral to move up and down the board, both with picks and players. So they can kind of play this a couple different ways. And like I said, Brad Holmes, all the 20 years that he spent with the Rams organization, he's shown he knows what to do come draft time. So I have a lot of faith in what they're building over there. It's a historic franchise. I want to see the Lions return to prominence. Like, I want to see them competitive. I think the league is more fun when some of these historic franchises are competitive. Obviously, I always want my team to win, but I think Detroit's just been a sad story for too long, and I would love to see them do something.
Same here. Hey, real quick, I know, Mike, you said your 2 first-round picks. Adrian, who do you got for your 2 first-round picks? And then I'll say mine, and we'll move on. If I'm
Detroit, well, anybody who knows me knows I don't believe in Ohio State quarterbacks at all. So I'm out of the CJ Stroud sweepstakes.
Okay.
For them, I think Bryce Young is very appealing, but for me, I would go Hendon Hooker for the Detroit Lions. And I know that seems like a reach because he's kind of just caught fire this season, right? He doesn't have the body of work that a Bryce Young or a CJ Stroud does, but I think he's probably the most mature. He's probably the most NFL ready quarterback, not necessarily the highest ceiling. I think his ceiling is still pretty high, but I think if you look at the talent level, I don't think anybody's looking at Bryce Young and CJ Stroud and saying, oh, Hendon Hooker is more talented than those two. I don't believe that. But I think he's very complete, and I think he's what this team needs. He's NFL ready, he's mature, and a team that's rebuilding and they've already got so many young pieces, you're going to need a quarterback to kind of step in and be that leader, be calm and steady. I think Hendon Hooker could be that guy. So he would be my pick for them. And then my 2, I got to go with I don't think he'll be around by the time they get to if they just let the picks fall where they're going to fall. I think they would have to give up some capital to come back and get him. But I'm with you, Mike. I would pick Will Anderson, edge from Alabama, 100%. And we saw during the trade deadline this year that there was a premium on edge rushers. We saw it in free agency this season, premium on edge rushers. I think that's going to continue. That's going to be a trend probably for the next 2 to 3 seasons until they find another position, right, to exploit and say, oh, this is the new hot item. But expect Will Anderson if I'm Detroit, it just makes too much sense, right? Partner Aiden Hutchinson with Will Anderson. Yeah, that's a nasty combination. I do that all day long.
I love it. For me, I'm going to go with you on the same pick. Hendon Hooker, get your guy, right? Get your guy. Who cares what the world thinks? Get your guy, right? There's only one Hendon Hooker. I'm drinking the Kool-Aid and everything. We're filming this right now. It's 12:02 Eastern Standard Time, November 5th. And later on this evening, we're going to be able to see him face off against the number 1 team in the nation, Georgia. So that's going to be a great game to watch. But I'm going to say it's Hendon Hooker all day. And then for my second first round pick, I have them taking and going a little bit different. Brian Breesy, defensive tackle from Clemson. I think that's going to be really nice. Him, Aiden Hutchinson. You could probably get another really good D lineman. Man, it's just that D line is going to be so freaking important, man. But if not, they could even get the next best linebacker in the draft too, man. So a lot of good places that they can take and go. Thanks for watching another episode of the Touchdown with Doug Smith, where I cover all 32 NFL teams plus NFL exclusive interviews. Hit that subscribe button, hit the bell for the alerts, comment below, and we'll catch you next time on the Touchdown with Doug Smith.